Coming up,
The level of depravity,
horror at Harrods.
it made me feel cheap.
Mohamed Al Fayed owned the world's most prestigious store.
Whatever Mohamed Al Fayed wanted, he got.
He pretended to be respectable,
Hands everywhere.
but he was really a predator.
Tried to kiss me on the mouth. He was an animal.
Now his Australian victims expose his filthy secrets.
Behind those doors, he was a monster.
Welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast Extra Minutes. We're having a chat about horror at Harrods, a story that if you missed on Sunday night, you can catch on 9 Now or YouTube. And with me is the producer of this story, Anne Worthington. Welcome.
Hi.
The women that we spoke to were so incredibly brave, weren't they?
They were.
Did that blow you away?
It did. I think most of these women have been silent for decades and have often felt that what happened to them was only to them. And I think the fact that they've started to come together, that courage that they've seen in other women has been contagious, and coming together has given them that strength to speak out finally.
That's right. For so many years they were isolated, but there was also something else holding them back, I found, and that was fear.
Yes.
Fear of Mohamed Al Fayed, their
Yes.
abuser.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when they chose to speak, you could still see that fear and feel that fear, whether they were struggling to recount what happened, feeling like they might still be being watched, even though Mohamed Al Fayed died in 2023, that fear that he instilled across that workplace, and even after they left that workplace, was still really palpable.
Yeah, and considering it's, for some of them, it's 3 decades ago, that's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary.
Cool. When you first started speaking to the women, what did they tell you about the climate in which they worked that made understanding that fear a little easier?
They weren't allowed to talk to each other. Their phones were tapped and bugged. Their apartments were often tapped and bugged as well. They constantly felt that they were being watched, and it was a culture that separated and isolated these women. That's Mohamed Al Fayed wanted these women isolated and separate from each other. We heard accounts during the research of people that if they spoke to other colleagues, they were fired. So I think that was one way that he was able to make sure that they were silenced and not speaking about what was happening to them.
One of the other really strong allegations was that Mohamed Al Fayed, a hugely influential person, because he was a billionaire, he had money to throw around, that he had people in his pocket, so people that these women might go to, so outside Harrods itself, like the police or the local member, a politician. Did you come across that as well?
Yeah, Mohamed Al Fayed had influence over every part of London, it seemed, from the police to politicians, certainly people within his organisation. He was paid people off, and he surrounded himself with his security personnel, who were often ex-SAS, and also the head of his security was a former senior police officer. So even if people did try to speak, they were silenced.
And we saw that there were women who had gone to police, had come forward, and police determined that there wasn't enough evidence, that wasn't strong enough to proceed. It seems that was being played out. Mohamed Al Fayed's threats were being played out.
Yeah, that's right. And there was accounts of police officers always getting the Harrods Christmas hampers. You're right, there was 2 cases where women had gone to police and nothing came of that. In one case, it was even leaked to the press, and the woman involved had got a slight date wrong, and it was seen that there was not enough evidence to pursue those investigations. Of course, now with the latest revelations, the London Metropolitan Police are really under pressure to make sure that they are now investigating what they should have done many years ago. And I believe that they're looking into 21 cases that were reported to them before his death, and investigating 5 enablers, people that helped facilitate this systemic abuse.
Yeah, which is, to be, well, it's obviously welcome, but it is a little too late for some, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, but for these women, certainly during the research and during the interviews, I never got a sense that they're being motivated by anything other than really making sure that this man is remembered in the way that he should be, not as, this jovial kind of quirky character, which is how he was described when he passed, and represented in the popular Netflix series, but as someone who was a monster and who preyed on vulnerable young women that he employed at his store.
After being silent for so many years, they really want their voices heard now. Mm-hmm. They're very powerful in what they've got to say, and they're incredibly brave though still, because when talking to some of them, they quite seriously fear the brakes being cut on their car. They fear somebody jumping out of the bushes at them, and that is a real genuine thing. Mm. It sounds like a terrible novel or Hollywood drama, but this is what they're living with. Yeah. So to actually see them on our screens, to hear what happened to them, is a big step, massive step. Mm. I think for some of our listeners too, some of the kind of quirky, interesting detail around how Mohamed Al Fayed operated was that, well, certainly Tom Bowers says that the guest rooms at the Ritz in Paris were bugged.
That's right, as he found out himself.
That's right. You can stay there and be eavesdropped upon.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Why that would have to be. I mean, for, book in and have your assignations and your stay there documented.
That's right.
Incredible.
And I mean, there was, I think, Anne Marie, when she signed up to join the company, she talked about how at the induction process, on the onboarding process, they talked about surveillance cameras, but everyone thought that there would be many, many more. There wasn't anywhere that you could go, anyone that you could talk to, that he wasn't across. As much as he was a serial predator of women, he was also obsessed with that control of people and looking into their personal life and what they were doing as well.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember, because we've spoken to these women as mature, accomplished adults, they were just kids.
Yeah.
And they were signing up to something, I think, that they thought was normal. I mean, they didn't sign up to being abused, of course, but to accept that they would be under surveillance all the time, or that they had to go and have their sexual health assessed by the Harrods doctors. There were no red flags, because they thought this was part of being in the world of Harrods, a prestigious, well-respected, revered place.
That's right. And they all had these memories of Harrods, whether it was from childhood, if they had British grandparents, or it was a place that they described as magic, as a place where dreams could come true, and they felt really proud to be part of that organisation. And I think you've mentioned the medicals. I mean, I have to say, when I started researching this, it was I found it very confronting, and I was confused, because Harrods is a department store, and I was like, what do you mean you had a medical examination to work in a department store? But it was pushed as a perk of the job. It was pushed as, they look after their staff. This was something, we're looking after you. But of course, those medical examinations for the women he had scouted on the shop floor and promoted were incredibly invasive gynecological examinations. For some of these women, their first internal examination. And then if that's not bad enough, they weren't given the results. They were often, given their results of those tests and informed by their boss.
And what was so sinister is that their abuse happened soon after.
Yeah.
So if they were given a clean bill of health, then it was Mohamed Al Fayed being given the green light in his mind, that they were clean and therefore safe to attack.
Yeah, he was vetting them, vetting his victims. And it's not just one case of one woman having a medical. This was a pattern of abuse that he was doing, from scouting, promoting, screening, attacking. And that's how he operated.
It's important to understand that this story continues despite his death, as you say, in 2023. The women are speaking out. They're very strong. As you said, the police are investigating. And that's where the focus is now, isn't it, on these so-called enablers, the people who knew exactly what was going on.
Well, the women and Tom Bower, who wrote Mohamed Al Fayed's unauthorised biography, Keaton Stone, who is the English documentarian who took it to the BBC, and how this latest attempt to out him came about, they all say there is absolutely no way that he acted alone, that he had to have people facilitating and enabling this abuse, turning a blind eye, being paid off in whatever capacity. And they're wanting people to come forward and be on the right side of history and share what they know, because often with this story, one person can have a tiny little piece of the puzzle that fits and tells a complete story for a part. I mean, he was the chairman for 25 years, so this happened over decades, and they're asking for people to be on the right side and come forward and speak about what they knew.
When you consider that, how long he reigned over Harrods, and consider how many people walked through those doors, that could be a lot of enablers. That's a lot of people who knew, who might have been able to help or report him or back up the women who did go to police, who just didn't.
Yeah.
And it's all about money, isn't it? Money talks.
Absolutely. And he was, incredibly wealthy and one of the most powerful men in Britain. And he did. He used to carry around a brick of £50 notes, and that was the norm, and that's how he got people to do what he wanted, was buy money. There was no one that couldn't be bought in his eyes.
Everything was transactional.
Everything was transactional.
I remember being quite affected by one of the anecdotes from Anne-Marie, where she had witnessed one of the alleged enablers taking Polaroids of attractive young women and taking them up to the boss, the chairman, for him to peruse and select, and coming back with those £50 notes tucked into her top. And then those girls were then chosen and paraded up to him for his selection. It's dark and it's devious, isn't it?
Absolutely. And people whose, when they did try and report, if they had evidence, it was destroyed. It seems that the cover-up of this man was vast, and there's many people that, as Keaton and others have said, the time is now. They will keep searching for these people and trying to hold them to account.
Well, watch this space.
Indeed.
More stories to come, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. Remember, if you want to catch our original story, go to 9Now or YouTube.